Hello everyone, this is Ace the Ocarina Maker, and I have a bit of a different video for you today, a top 9 list. Now, I've seen a lot of top 9 lists done by different users. I've seen lists like the top 9 most hated TF2 weapons, or the top 9 worst TF2 weapons, but what I haven't seen focused on are full-on loadouts. The focus is not the weapons as individuals, but the use of these weapons together. So, that being said, welcome to the top 9 most hated loadouts in Team Fortress 2. Now, something to note before we go into this video is that this list is not my personal opinion. I have asked the community and looked around and seen what the community thinks are the worst weapon combinations, whether they be overpowered, just not fun to play against, or just lacking in skill in general. These are the top 9 most hated loadouts in Team Fortress 2, as seen by the community. Now, if I miss a loadout or you think something should be in here, let me know in the comments down below. But, as it is, this list is comprised of the ones that I see people hating on the most, and generally the ones that get the most hate from the community. With that being said, let's delve right into this. Number 1, we're going to be focusing on the Scout, and the number 1 most hated loadout for Scout is the Force of Nature, Flying Guillotine, and Sandman. You guys might have seen the Flying Guillotine and Sandman coming. Why the Force of Nature is in there is because say you bleed an enemy, or say you stun them, but you miss one of the 2 shots. Well, your Force of Nature more than likely is going to finish them off. A lot of people hate on the Force of Nature in general because of its extraordinarily high damage output and how much knockback it gives. Basically, this Scout loadout is all about keeping enemies away from you, but doing as much damage as possible if they try to get near you, or picking them off from across the map with a crit from the Sandman and Guillotine. Now, something I discovered while getting footage for this is it is incredibly difficult to actually pull off a Sandman Flying Guillotine combo without a lot of practice. So, I have a lot of respect for people who can do it effectively. Still, whenever I'm in a server and someone pulls off a Flying Guillotine Sandman kill, I hear nothing but hate and complaint towards the guy using it. Though typically the guy using this loadout doesn't care anyway, and he feeds off of the hate like the leech that he is. I don't know where I'm going with this. As it is, this seems to be the most hated loadout in all of Team Fortress 2 for Scout. Between the knockback, high damage output, and crits, which people are always fans of crits. Number 2, and this one has actually been one of the most hated loadouts in the Team Fortress 2 community for a long time. Not really because it's overpowered, but because it's kind of cheap. And that is, of course, the Black Box, Conjurer, and Escape Plan. The whole idea of this loadout is just screaming cowardice. Both the Black Box and the Conjurer together are all about getting your health restored, and with these two together, you can basically shoot a bunch of rockets at your feet while enemies are surrounding you, with little to no consequence. The Escape Plan thrown in there for when you actually manage to deplete this soldier's health, he runs away with the Escape Plan like a coward to go and resupply. This soldier loadout is focused on nothing but keeping the user alive, sacrificing a shotgun and an extra rocket just to do so. Now, I actually used to use this loadout myself, so I'm not by no means hating on it, but the community definitely has some hate for this loadout, and I do understand why. That being said, the Black Box, Conjurer, and Escape Plan is definitely the most hated loadout for Soldier. It has been for a long time. Moving on to number 3, we're focusing on the Pyro. Now, initially I was going to have the Phlogistinator and Scorch Shot be on this list because, well, the Scorch Shot is just annoying as heck to fight against from a distance, and the Phlogistinator always gets hate. And then throw in a Neon Annihilator because, well, you can just dip your toe in water and that thing will crit you. It's kind of ridiculous. But ever since the Phlogistinator's nerfs, I don't really hear people calling it overpowered or raging over it anymore. It's just more along the lines of, ugh, this WM1. Pyro has become less of a threat with the Phlogistinator since the nerfs, because you have to actually know how to use it and have some game sense to ambush people. Yet most Phlogistinator users just WM1 at somebody and then it's really easy to pick them off, so it's not overpowered, it's just kind of like, oh, is he really doing that? There is a loadout, though, that people complain about much more than the Phlogistinator and Scorch Shot, and that is the Stock Flamethrower, the Reserve Shooter, and the Extinguisher. Now, a lot of you might be wondering why not use the Degreaser with this. Well, since the Degreaser's nerfs, it's not as viable as a flamethrower or for attacking large crowds. It's very good for one-on-one, which I guess in a competitive standpoint the degreaser would be better for this loadout. However, in general, the stock flamethrower has to win out for one reason: WM1. This thing can very effectively WM1, much like the Flog, and it still can air blast just as well as the degreaser can. It just doesn't have a faster switch-to speed, which you don't need to worry about too much with the reserve shooter, something that can switch to very rapidly. Now, the extinguisher is still in here because just in case you didn't finish him off with the WM1, air blast spam, and reserve shooter crits, you can still get a mini crit or a crit from the behind with the extinguisher. Mainly the extinguisher I would use for sneaking up on enemies, where you don't want to blast them away from you and then hit them with the reserve shooter. You would just light them on fire, switch to the axe, and then crit them. This loadout is incredibly annoying to play against, and I hear a lot of people still complain about it, just for the fact that the reserve shooter is a really cheap weapon in a lot of scenarios. Playing as this loadout, however, while I was getting footage, this loadout was really fun to play as, and I might come back to this someday. It was a complete blast. That being said, though, this seems to be the most hated loadout currently in Team Fortress 2 for Pyro. I'm sure after the Pyro update there will be a new one, but as it is now, this one seems to be getting the most hate currently. Up next, for number 4, we actually have a Demo Knight loadout instead of a Demo Man loadout, and it is the Booties, Splendid Screen, and Scotsman Skullcutter. Oh, where to begin with this? The Scotsman Skullcutter is an incredibly broken weapon right now. It has the melee range of a sword, yet it can random crit and it has a 20% damage bonus. Its only downside is a slight movement speed nerf, which can be completely negated by the Booties. Pair that with the Splendid Screen and this thing has an incredibly high damage output capable of one-shotting a heavy. Even if you don't have a charge ready, your random crits are more than likely going to get quite a few kills for you while you wait for your charge to come back, and since the Splendid Screen charges faster, that won't be a very long wait anyway. This loadout is incredibly overpowered in terms of Demo Knight, and it is receiving a huge amount of hate. I can't understand why Valve ever thought that the Scotsman Skullcutter needed to have random crits and a damage bonus, and why its downside needed to be so small. The Scotsman Skullcutter is not only an incredible Demo Knight tool, but it's a very powerful Demo Man tool. Pair the Scotsman Skullcutter with the Splendid Screen and Booties and you just unleash its full potential and complete madness upon the team. This loadout deserves every bit of the hate that it gets, and it's definitely due for a nerf in the near future. Moving on to number 5, focusing on the Heavy. Now, Heavy was a hard one to figure out what the most hated loadout is for him. A lot of people think that he's generally balanced, or his weapons are either underpowered or just standard stock, nothing to worry about. However, there is a loadout that a lot of people are hating on currently, and it is a very fun loadout to play as, but playing against can be very dangerous. And that is the Tomislav, Buffalo Steak Sandwich, and Killing Gloves of Boxing. Now I'll explain why the Tomislav is in here in a minute, but let's start with focusing on the Buffalo Steak Sandwich and Killing Gloves of Boxing. Now this loadout is already kind of infamous, so if you don't know already, the Buffalo Steak Sandwich grants you mini crits on your melee and a faster movement speed for, I think it is 8 seconds. The Killing Gloves of Boxing give you guaranteed crits on kill. So using these two together, you can use mini crits to get a kill and then continue with a crit rampage. Or, this is where the Tomislav comes in. After you get crits on your Killing Gloves of Boxing, you can quickly switch to the Tomislav and deal crits with your minigun. This loadout is very versatile and very dangerous to fight against, however difficult to pull off in a lot of situations, because for it to be overpowered, you need to find somebody that you can effectively kill with the Gloves of Boxing and then not be in enough danger to switch to your Tomislav and start firing. Still, as it stands, a lot of people do complain about this loadout when they see it together and when they get killed by it, and though Heavy doesn't receive a lot of hate, this is probably the most hated loadout for Heavy in Team Fortress 2, as it is currently. Number 6. Now this one pretty much goes without saying. Number 6 is the Gunslinger, Frontier Justice, and the Wrangler. The Wrangler can be very effective at keeping your mini-sentry alive, and letting it take a lot more damage than a mini-sentry should. it also dramatically increases the fire rate of the mini-sentry, which can be devastating. However, there is still the fact that you can place down mini-sentries that are meant to be disposable, and whenever they go down, if they've gotten a decent amount of kills on them, or even a couple, you can go mad with the Frontier Justice crits. This loadout has been one of the most hated loadouts for Engineer for a very long time. From the fact that the Gunslinger gives you an additional 25 health to the fact that Engineer just does not care about his sentries and he can spam them as much as he wants because they only take up 100 metal. And then if you kill his sentries, he has crits to deal with his shotgun. This loadout is just dangerous to try and fight against, and generally not fun to fight against, because of how spammable his sentries are. Now, this loadout is very fun to play as, though, and is honestly a pretty effective strategy in a lot of competitive situations. So I do respect this loadout, but this loadout definitely deserves the hate it gets. That doesn't mean that I dislike this loadout. I think it's a really fun thing to play as, and when playing against it, there are some pretty easy ways to combat it. Still, it does deserve the hate it gets, and it earns the number 6 spot here, even though these numbers are really going based on class numbers and not what's actually the most hated. Moving on to number 7. Number 7, focusing on the Medic. Now, Medic was an interesting one to cover because Medic doesn't generally receive a lot of hate. However, this loadout, I am fully confident deserves to be on this list, and that is the Crusaders Crossbow. Now, I'm not hating on the Crusaders Crossbow. I absolutely love this weapon. It's just, the Crusaders Crossbow is so good that there's really no reason to use the other guns in a lot of situations. So the Crusaders Crossbow, the Kritzkrieg, of course, and the Ubersaw. Now keep in mind that I'm not hating on this loadout, except for the Kritzkrieg, because I do not like the Kritzkrieg. This is just the loadout that gets the most hate when fighting against. The Ubersaw, capable of restoring incredible amounts of your Uber charge, and having just one of the highest crit rates of any weapon in the game, if not the highest crit rate. Mix that in with the Crusaders Crossbow, which you can heal your teammates from across the map, but you can also deal some significant damage to your enemies too. And the Kritzkrieg. Why does the Kritzkrieg exist? The Kritzkrieg grants whoever you're healing full crit ability, which, granted, you have to have a good heal target to make effective use of this thing. Though, healing a random soldier in a pub will still get you pretty effective results just because of how powerful this medigun actually is. Put that on top of the fact that it is one of the fastest charging mediguns in the game, and the fact that it can fully overheal, and this thing is a force to be reckoned with. And if you've got a good Kritzkrieg medic and soldier combo, you're just done. You're done. There's not a lot you can do against that other than try to air blast all of the rockets that he shoots out. Which, Soldier can shoot rockets slightly faster than Pyro can reflect, which becomes a bit of a problem. Really, your only hope is to reflect his initial rockets right into him or his medic and stop the Kritzkrieg charge, which is easier said than done, definitely. This loadout definitely gets the most hate. And more than any other loadout on this list, this loadout is just initially called overpowered by a lot of people. It's to the point where, aside from maybe switching out the Kritzkrieg in different situations, there's really no reason to use anything other than the Crusaders Crossbow and the Ubersaw. That's been the meta for a long time. So Crusaders Crossbow, Kritzkrieg, and Ubersaw definitely lands the number 7 spot on this list. Up next, we have number 8, and we're covering the Sniper. Now, Sniper doesn't really get a lot of hate in general, but there are a few weapons that I do hear being hated on more than any other. The Machina, the fact that it has that extra damage and it can penetrate its players. This thing's banned in competitive for a reason. The Darwin's Dumbass Shield, I mean the Darwin's Danger Shield, for giving you extra bullet survivability and being able to survive an initial headshot in a sniper versus sniper battle. And the Kukri. I really don't hear a lot of sniper melees get hated on. I honestly thought people would hate on the Tribalman Shiv more because one hit from the Shiv plus the bleed damage does do more damage than the Kukri, and it has a pretty high crit rate. However, the Kukri itself is a force to be reckoned with. It is a very good weapon, a very powerful melee, and it has no downsides, of course. It seems like all of Sniper's other melees have two great downsides to be comparable to the Kukri. You could argue that the Sahan Shah should be on this list, but the Sahanshaw is only effective if you're already on low health, and if you're sporting the Darwin's Danger Shield, you're probably sporting that so that you can survive as much as possible. So if you're on low health, you'd probably be retreating instead of trying to fight with your knife. It really comes down to preference, but I rarely hear people complain about the Sahanshaw, because if he's on low health and he managed to hit you, he kinda earned that kill. It's the Kukri's random crits that I hear complained about the most, and the Darwin's Danger Shield, everyone hates this thing. The Machina itself people call overpowered, which I guess in competitive I see that. Personally, I used to use the Machina a lot until its tracer rounds became too much of a problem for me. Because it's like, oh hey look, I just killed this guy. Follow this beam of light and find out exactly where I am. Come and get me, soldiers. Random crit me with your rockets. Still, I definitely understand the hate that the Machina gets. And while I don't hate the weapon myself, I do understand why so many people hate the Machina. And then that just paired with the Darwin's Danger Shield and the Kukri, it's probably the most powerful sniper loadout in the game. And the most hated because of Sniper's survivability against headshots, and his damage bonus and ability to penetrate players, plus his very high random crit chance with the Kukri. So, the Machina, Darwin's Danger Shield, and Kukri earns the number 8 spot on this list. Number 9. Now a lot of you might have seen this one coming. There's no denying it. This has been the most hated spy loadout ever since it was first donned, and it continues to be the most hated spy loadout, despite spies' buffs. They buffed this loadout, and that is the Enforcer, Dead Ringer, and Spy Sickle. For the longest time, people have been complaining about the Enforcer's damage bonus, how spammable the Dead Ringer is, and how spies can initially be invincible to Pyro with the Spy Sickle. Now, however, these weapons together are even more of a force to be reckoned with. The fact that the Enforcer can pierce resistances. The Dead Ringer is more spammable than ever, especially since you gain a speed bonus upon the Dead Ringer being activated. And the Spy Sickle. Oh my god. They might have gotten rid of the Silent Killer attribute, but the fact that you can initially restore the Spy Sickle with ammo packs is ridiculous. Basically, with this loadout, if you're a competent spy, you will never, ever die. The only thing that could effectively kill you is a random crit while you were not prepared for it. The Dead Ringer can be triggered and almost immediately, if not immediately, be brought back by an ammo pack or a full ammo pack. The Spy Sickle also has a very high regenerate rate, but you can restore that with ammo as well, making you completely invincible to Pyros. There's also the fact that the Dead Ringer also has some afterburn and flame immunity once it's triggered as well. So you can use the Dead Ringer and then use the Spy Sickle if a Pyro is still chasing you and manages to chase you down while you've got that speed bonus. It makes Pyro completely useless for hunting down spies, and then you add the Enforcer to that with its extra damage, and you have easily the most hated loadout in Team Fortress 2. Everything about this loadout is just screaming, nerf me. The fact that you can never die if you're a competent spy, you can get away with so much, that even though the Dead Ringer doesn't offer you as much resistance when you trigger the cloak, it doesn't matter. There's a new playstyle where it's just, oh, your Dead Ringer's triggered? Run away and they can never hope to find you. Whereas it used to be, just tank as much damage as possible, and then when the watch runs out, hopefully you got away in time. The speed bonus is definitely a buff compared to the damage reduction, and this loadout is just receiving so much hate right now that I'm surprised they haven't nerfed it already. Though, me saying that, they're probably going to nerf it later, right after this video comes out. That's just how it goes. This loadout, for being so incredibly broken and overpowered, definitely earns the top spot on this list, and it deserves every bit of it. So, as of this video, these were the most hated loadouts in Team Fortress 2. Now keep in mind that this is based on the community and not my own personal opinions. Even though I do hate a couple of these loadouts, it's purely based on what the community is complaining about the most. My own top 9 most hated loadouts list would look very different from this. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know what weapon combinations you hate the most down in the comments below. I always appreciate your feedback, and I hope to see you all in the next one. I hope you enjoyed my first top 9 list, and that is all for now. All of you have a wonderful day.
forever.